if you're doing what you did yesterday, you will always get the results of what you got yesterday. And that is exactly not what we want to have. We want to have something new. I think it was Einstein who once said that the definition of insanity is to do the things over and over again and expect a different result. So the only way you can get different results is by reshaping the way you do. And that's our aim to do that for society. We looked upon ourselves in 2019 and made out of what we call the pain point model, where we saw all our pain points were. And we actually discovered that we had a lot of areas in which we could become much better. And then we looked in and said, what should we do in order to achieve that? And we realized that we have to create a community for radical transformation. We didn't know how to do that, but fortunately we all got Corona, so we could sit by our computers and travel the whole world very shortly. So we had meetings in Venezuela and Australia the same day, and that actually meant that we could visit a lot of communities in order to learn from these communities and what was creating a good community. When we learned that, we got together with a rather famous Danish architect called Copenhagen, and we said to them, if we want to create a community, what should that kind of building have to do? How should we program such a building, and how should it work? So together with Kobe, we called in a lot of different groups who could be the ones who would be able to be working within this community and saying, what should that kind of building actually have within it? They said, this is the way we want to go. We don't know how to do it, what it costs, and what it will be like, but this is the aim we got for the next 10 years. So that's a new way of transforming decision making. So you actually look upon the goal before you look upon yourselves and the roads. There is an old Chinese saying that goes, if you don't know what beach to arrive at, no course is right. So you have to know what beach we want to land at what stage. And when we did that, we took our programming, and then we said, well, we've got to find a building. So we traveled around Copenhagen, and then we found this building. This building is an area which we would like to be. It's an area where you have the largest, vast amount of social problems. You have an area which is in the arts is expanding a lot. We decided we would not be building new, we would be renovating. So when we had made those decisions, we bought this building.
But I thought that this is a good opportunity to go on a journey together and look at this house more as a case study project where we could play around with ideas, but the ultimate goal was to look at the house as its own ecological system and see how much could we achieve with the things that was already present in the house itself. So one of the first things that came into our minds is that if we wanted to achieve some of the spacious goals the client had, we would need to create double height spaces or triple height spaces, and you can see that we're immediately going to get rid of a lot of concrete. So the project, or like the building itself, kind of formed the idea that if we shouldn't throw anything out, which was the goal here, we should utilize what was already here, then we would have to find somewhere to utilize that concrete. So what you're standing in right now, like the foundation for this whole stair that we just went up through, is that actually the concrete slab that used to be here that's just been flipped down, and you can also see at the top here is the one that used to be in the level just above, that has been flipped up. And that has actually been like the guiding principle throughout the whole project. So the concrete, none of the concrete has been thrown out, it's just been utilized for various purposes. You can also see there is a concrete stair in the very back, but also for furniture, as you saw, like the cafe desk and tabletops and benches all around the building. We kind of like found ways where we could utilize all the concrete. And also when you enter the building out there, you can see that when you were coming up to the building, you were walking on a yellow brick pavement, which is actually the lower wall partitions that used to be underneath the windows that have been cut out and flipped down to form this this brick pavement. You can also see that on the backside from where you're standing right now. So the building is used to, like the exterior facade used to be there where you can see the columns. And then we just extended the building with this around 1.5 meters to give the building a vertical infrastructural quality, because that is one of the issues with this type of buildings, that you can't really penetrate the structures without having to introduce a second load-bearing system. And also, if we did that, it would be very fixed solutions. So if we were to increase the amount of airflow sometime in the future, we would have to increase or mount extra static systems in the building. So we decided to extend that. So it was actually both a way to make it very like a pragmatic way of getting all the kind of new installations in that we would need in order to meet the comfortable requirement, but also the requirement of the buildings legislation. But then at the same time, it offers a very flexible way that this building over time can adapt to different use. And then it also actually became a way to energy optimize the existing facade, because suddenly we are having a new facade outside of the existing. Then we also, of course, the story with the bricks and the concrete is very dominant in the building here, but we also deliberately decided to keep much of our waste in the building without really knowing what to use it for. Simply because we have agreed that now we have to take this serious. You see it at my back, it's also going to be a public restaurant, or at least that's something that is being discussed at some point. We have a library when we move up to the second floor.
We have our own wood, so we sent Søren and others to the forest and spoke to people there, and they said they're going to take different kinds out. And then we took that wood and said we would like to place it here. We thought then we're going to create one place which is state-of-the-art for doing that. So that is what we've done. And the only place in Denmark where you have material equipment like this is at the Royal Opera House. So here you can actually train the way you want to do stage art, being dancing or singing or whatever it might be, with the best kind of equipment. And then when you want to do that, you can apply for it. And you apply for a residency of a period of 1 to 2 weeks, and we will actually pay a salary for being here. But of course, we will also demand that you're creating something. But the whole idea is to expand on, heighten the level of quality of the three groups. And we can actually see that it has already paid off, because the government came out with a new policy on the free stage art 2 weeks ago, going to use a lot more money on that area. So we think that's an area which really creates new kinds of stage art to the benefit of all the things, and not necessarily in fixed theaters and in fixed forms. So that was a very important thing for us to create this kind of room, but it has been quite difficult.
Yeah, because now we're standing in the basement where there used to be parking lots. We still have a lot of it if you go around to the other door. But this is also the first of the spaces that I mentioned earlier that is situated here in the back part of the building, where we have most of the production spaces in the house. So next to this we have
like an AV studio for podcasts and stuff, and then comes the dance studio and then all the workshops afterwards. But this has been specifically difficult. You can play with a 100 decibel or 120 decibel without being able to hear it from the outside. So it's been a difficult thing to find space for this in the existing buildings. The building which has been here since the 80s. So this nicotine yellow color is of course come because the color is changing, it's getting more yellow over the years. So we try to match that very perfectly, and I think we kind of like succeeded. But it's also just to tell you like that it's been an interesting journey for us to just see how much could we extract, not just the materials on its own, but also like aesthetic qualities from things that.
We have an 88% less use of carbon dioxide compared to building a new building. So we are actually using 88% less CO2 by doing this building. We have not calculated this ourselves because we would know that people wouldn't believe us. So we have had the University for Technical Sciences doing it, and that's also because I started up saying we have 3 words: experimenting, learning, sharing. When we make this university do the calculations, they will automatically also teach in these, and then we'll be fulfilling our goal of sharing. So, seen from the figures point, it is a viable financial way of doing it, and it's very, very good seen from a sustainability point of view.
It's very, the topic there was sustainability in architecture, so we have built it with only one construction and only cladding on one side, either where we have the dark space inside, we have the cladding outside, and where we have the light spaces, we have the linen inside. And it's of course, we take it apart when we move it, and not in all the pieces, but so it's built as something moving. Yeah, but let's go in and take time to adapt to both darkness but also lightness. Here we can get from having light channeled down. The surfaces here is lime paint, and lime paint is small crystals, which is super good at reflecting and create diffuse light. Even if the sun sometimes look in, because the channel is that deep, it will never come in here. So whatever weather it's outside, this space will have this ambient, feel good atmosphere. But what you also perhaps experience is that there's not that much shadow. So everything is a little bit two-dimensional. So you cannot get everything in one kind of daylight. Mm-hmm. So that's, and here we have separated different kind of typology of daylight. And this is where we talk about reflected, diffuse skylight. Yeah. Questions? But when we have our students in here, they have never looked at daylight in the professional way when they start in their education as architectural designers. So what we want them to learn here is to see how little light can actually enlighten big space. So the opening up there is very small, and if you just have a good channel to spread it down, you can actually, with a very little hole, create quite a lot of light. What we also will experience when we move out in the next is that the adaptation, the time we are going to use for adapt from very light to darkness afterwards, and then we went into a new light room. So the younger you are, the faster you can adapt. I'm not good at that because I'm in my last part of my life. So when I have students in here, I say, oh, when I go out there, I say, I can't see anything, but I know it's this direction, so let's go. So it's also about that, and also how you, with very simple angles, can actually create a quite interesting architectural space. So that is the story about this. You can also, Velux also have some kind of equipment where they actually, in tubes, can channel daylight a long distance. We don't have that in our school, but at Kolding Design School, I know that they have an example on how long you can just channel light through a tube or something.
It was a bit creepy, yeah, because it took so long. And then it's also because
Only because of the color of the wall. It's also because you only get 20% of the light when you have it from side. So therefore, every skylight is a super effective light source. But we have the 5 stories high houses or more, then it can be quite difficult to get it. Now we have bluish color of the light, and you can see in the shadow it's quite blue. Our skin is not having that same color. And 10 minutes ago we have actually sun in here, and so you can see how the wood would glow. What we want to show here is both that when you have a light from the side, it's directed, have a direction into the space, and therefore you will be able to see the shadow in the surfaces even more compared to the other room. So here you actually have a shadow side and a light side, also on furniture. So, and that we do need for be able to understand form. So if you want to exhibit something, organic form, you can use skylight, but you need direct sidelight as well to be able to recognize the form. So, yeah, and here, as you see, we have some furniture because we also have a little play with the students, because we say, okay, put your chair where you want to be in the space. And some is putting themselves very close to a lot of light, and some are hiding themselves in the corner. and we discuss, because every person has a preferences to where to be, and that is why it's so difficult to make light for offices or where many people are gathering together, because we all have a different approach to light. So when we talk about how to create quality in daylight in space, the best quality is where we can actually adjust it and also adjust where to sit. And that is super complicated when we talk about architecture, because we have this office and you have to sit there, and so it's some of the things we discuss with our students, so they can be aware of flexibility, ability to move themselves, avoid computer controlled light situation where the blinds are going up and down depending on how the energy or sun or whatever. But if you can do it yourself, it's much better. So that's what we also discuss here. And we also discuss too much light. So when we talk about daylight quality, it's not about how much we have, but how we use it. At the first, when it was sited in the middle of Copenhagen, we have a big tree up there. So we have this flickering leaves and the shadows in all the space, and it was super beautiful. Here it's super even, and perhaps a little bit annoying. at least when we don't have the sun to create contrast in here. Next spring we will move it to forest or a park where we can put it between trees. So here it's very bluish and grays the surrounding, but now you see what happens when we put it into nature. Also the direction of here we have the vertical, and when the sun is shining, it's really black and white lined. So here it gives the space some kind of measuring by the horizontal lines as well.
We are very happy to have you here so that we can tell you a little bit about how we here at Effekt have been working with the sort of theme of slowing down, or what does that mean in architecture. It's something that we've been working with in the last decade in different ways. And what I'll do today is I'll try to give you a short introduction to the office, and then a few examples on how we work with this theme of slowing down, or the big transition in architecture, which we see basically as the project of our generation, the project of this century. We call it the transition to ecologism, like trying to figure out how can architecture become in service of life, like a widened understanding of life. Short introduction to Effekt. We are here on 3 floors, 50 people working within urbanism, architecture and landscape design. We always wanted to be not only architects, but also taking in the whole idea of going from landscape to city, urban spaces to architecture, because we want to see the buildings from the perspective of what do they do for their surroundings. And when we do urban design, we want to take sort of an architectural design perspective on how does that work for people. And then I'll come back to how we sort of have, over the last decade, implemented research as a sort of core activity of our projects. But we span quite a big variation of projects. 50% of what we do is here in Denmark. The other 45% is the rest of Europe, and then we have a few projects abroad, like Japan, Australia, like these overseas areas. And we are called Effekt. We called ourselves Effekt when we started the company 20 years ago, because we thought that our company should not be about our last names or who we are, but about the effect of what we do. So we try to measure our projects on the impact that it has on its surroundings. And as we started the company in 2005, we were mostly focused on the social and cultural impact of architecture and urbanism. How does that shape societies? But in the last decade, we have really opened up this huge gap of trying to understand what is the ecological, environmental impact of architecture, which is something we are still struggling to fully grasp, I think, across the industry. And the reason we started on that journey was that in 2013, I came across this chart, acceleration. And it shows the socio-economic development and trends over the last 250 years, and the sort of derived ecological impacts. If you kind of dive into it, this is the sort of global population growth, energy consumption growth, water usage growth, air trips. These are just a few examples. Deforestation, species going extinct, atmospheric CO2 concentrations, and then surface temperatures, so global warming. When you put that together, you have this kind of quite radical portrait of our age, a portrait that you may say started with the Industrial Revolution, but has really taken up speed in this acceleration in the last 50 years in my lifetime. And here we are in the mid-20s at this kind of peak of accelerating global crises. And when we saw this, to be honest, we were quite shocked. I remember exactly where I was sitting when I kind of started to sort of unpack the reality of this. And I showed it to my partner, and we decided, okay, Effekt shall be about bringing this acceleration back into a balance where the human habitats are put back in balance with the ecosystems that we are part of. So that is the agenda of the office. That's what we are working on. And one of the sort of acknowledgements is that this is not a technical task. When we started working with the sustainability, we thought this is something for the engineers to put some solar cells on the roof or whatever, but you soon realize that this is a kind of completely different sort of cosmology. It's going away from thinking humans at the center of the world and seeing humans as being part of bigger ecosystems. And once you start considering humans and our built environment as part of the bigger living environment, that starts slowly to change everything. It changes your perspective on what is a house, what is a city, and how do we live together with nature. So with this perspective, there's a much longer perspective on a house. It's no longer an object. It's a way to use material for a period of time so that you can inhabit them. And these materials, they come from somewhere, they go somewhere. And while the house is there, it will consume energy, resources, electricity, water, and produce waste streams that we designed for when we designed this house. It's a completely different systemic perspective on what is a house. And if you consider a city or the built environment, it's the same. This is also a way to configure the way we use land and channel resources through our consumption. So it's a simple diagram, but the implication is insane, and we are still working to figure out what does that mean. And when we discovered this, we decided we can no longer just be a consultancy doing designing of briefs that we are given. We need to have a significant research unit so that we can basically ask the right questions before we provide the answers, because we felt that the assignments we were given did not challenge the whole sort of this bigger way of thinking about the built environment. So by doing that, we actually changed our profile to become, partly research driven and partly consultancy driven. And we believe that architects are in a very good position to lead this transition, because architecture at the essence is the practice of designing the relationship between humans and the natural environment that we are part of. And here I'm not just talking about the experience, but also the flow of materials, where the building industry is responsible for so much material use and so much energy use, so big parts of our emissions, that we need to grapple with that as architects and engineers when we design the future of our cities. So again, it's a huge question and task, but we're quite well equipped as architects to take that on. So now I'm going to show you a few different examples of how we work with this in sort of traditional design and assignments, but also through research and development projects. So the first project is we have a kind of line of projects that are designed to bring people into nature and get more people to experience nature. So this is the Forest Tower, which was realized in 19, I think, just south of Copenhagen. And it's one of the projects that we've done that really changes people's experience of going to nature. So this is one part of the forest that we're working in here. And the question was, how can we make this a destination for people from Copenhagen, but also tourists, without destroying the very attraction that they come to see the forest? And the answer for that was actually a quite simple solution, designing a very simple boardwalk as the main, and that means that when people come here, and we now have 300,000-400,000 people coming here every year, they do not walk into the forest, they do not step on the small trees that are growing up here. They actually stay on this. Some kids, dogs run off, but that's okay. And that is the kind of infrastructure that we provided to the tower. And then the tower itself is actually just basic this infrastructure going into a spiral up through the forest ceiling and high enough. Denmark is a flat country, so when you come up through the forest, you can actually see quite far. But the forest is kind of embedded in, or the tower is embedded in the forest. We didn't want it to stand out as a strong object when you come there. But once you come inside, it's a cathedral of this pathway walking up, and then a couple of trees were left in the middle, so you walk up along these trees when you climb the 700-meter boardwalk. And once you've come to the middle part, it starts expanding again, and then you have a sort of ball up here where you can see the other visitors when you look inside, and then you can overview the forest when you look to the outside. And this very simple design has a quite magic impact on the people coming there. So they come back, and they come back, and they come back, even though it's pretty expensive actually to buy the tickets by now.
So who was it commissioned by?
This was commissioned by a guy who did kind of rope climbing in the trees, and he had this idea
So
of...
it's a private...
It's a private, he's not the landowner, but he has the kind of leasing of the area. Very brave entrepreneur who thought no bank would support it.
Oh.
So it was really, took him a long time to get the financing up and going.
It was finished in which year?
I think it was 19, yeah. Was it 17? This is how it looks from the top. So it's very simple, even almost a natural pattern that feels quite sort of integrated in the forest. And obviously it's also a piece of architecture and design, but we're actually quite proud that it is more an experience of this landscape that you get there. And what happened here was that he had like 25,000 visitors until this tower was done. And then it went up to 400 in 1 year, and it's staying up there, going a little bit lower. Now we're looking at the next addition to this. It basically means that his investment was paid back by visitor payments in 1 year, which is a quite good investment. Yeah. And that is also like this was a completely new thing. It also, I mean, this happened just before COVID, so obviously this was a big attraction during COVID. But it's also quite new that you have nature as an attraction. So we were then later hired to do something similar for a small municipality in Norway. They go walking in nature, and they were an aging community in this neighborhood, so they wanted to have an accessible route to this Klokkehammeren, the big rock. And so we designed with them for a long time, and with the contractor, this very simple boardwalk that is, again, like, it's very gently integrated in the forest. It's built with equipment that you can drive in, and kind of small machinery. And even the construction is kind of merged with the forest here. And this is done so it could be built by the local contractor in collaboration with them. And again, this is completely changing. This is pretty much off the beaten track, this attraction. And they also experienced, after getting this, sudden rise of visitors to 65,000, and suddenly the small shops and the small community was growing with people investing there. So this idea of using nature attractions to also put life and commerce into small societies is something that we're quite proud of. But this is not only and this is a project that we're working on right now, which is an art center in the west of Jutland. Which is just in the detail design process. So it has workshops and meeting places, and it's both for production and experience of art. But it's not only in these, and this is another kind of, this is a floating nature center that is being shared by 3 municipalities for a nature park in Lillebælt that is almost going into construction now. So we won the competition by finding a way to recycle a pram of concrete, and that's now going into construction as well. So we have a lot of these different sort of experiences that are tied to nature. But we also use this when we do urban design. So this is the renewal and sort of transformation of a modernistic area that had been a really tough neighborhood built in the 60s. And it had a really hardcore landscape strategy developed in the 60s. And we did, together with Slag, a completely different landscape where we used the water and we used the natural terrain to regenerate nature in between these buildings. So suddenly you have fruits and animal life that is just increasing every year. It's growing on its own as a way to kind of completely regenerate this urban neighborhood through nature. We did the same when we were doing the climate proofing of a small city in Tønder, doing attractions as part of the technical design. And when we do urban, this is a suburban plan called the Nature City, where we can sequester as much CO2 in the forest that we grow in this area as we will emit with the buildings over a life cycle of 50 years. And now I'm going to show you one of the more sort of research-driven building projects that we've done recently. This is called Living Places. You may know it already. It's a project that we did together with Velux and Artelia in partnership between the 3. Here we took a more critical perspective on building, asking ourselves, can we build in a way that is healthy for both planet and people? And the design experiment here was to see how low can we go with the CO2 emissions using material that we can find available in stores. And so we started looking at the emissions over the life cycle, 50-year operations of the building. But it's actually only when you start expanding, so you see with the sort of embedded materials in the construction, and what happens at the end of life, that you see the real big emitters. So by doing the design with bio-based materials, we could actually have a project that is CO2 neutral until the end of life, where we still calculate that it's being burned and it emits all the stored carbon. However, this is not going to happen in our case. But what we showed here was that you can actually cut emissions with 2/3 using all the solutions we already have at the market. It's just a different way of thinking about the design, where we measure not only the cost, but also the CO2 as a kind of currency in the design. And that takes us to a completely different place when we look at every building component. And this building is designed for disassembly. So it was assembled here as a kind of test case in Copenhagen. We had 16,000 visitors through to share our learnings and our findings with this. It's a nice, normal home, stacked in 3 stories, has a lot of extremely nice daylight, so we could also make sure that it's the most healthy building, sort of top of class. But we did get to a completely new record for low emissions in Danish housing. That was not done before, and it's not because we are geniuses. We just had the fortune of doing this research, of asking these questions with Velux. So I would argue that this is something most people can do, and now the records are being beaten in Denmark. And we took this building down and have now erected it in a new place to test if it was designed for disassembly. So this building does not have to be burned, and that does not have to become garbage. It can be moved and disassembled. This is at the headquarters of Velux, where we build it again now. We took this endeavor into another project with Home.Earth, together with the Vandkunst. We designed this community just outside of Copenhagen. This is they have a social ambition of sharing 25% of the profit with the tenants. And also here we showed that we can cut below the Danish law we can get very low on also multi-story. So again, we set a new record for multi-story buildings with record low CO2 emissions. And this was in Denmark with really good Danish partners. We're now trying to see if we can take these learnings into internationalize it with a building system, showing how you can take modularity into different urban concepts. So we have 2 projects coming up now, one in Porto, just north of Porto in Guimarães, and one in Holland with this building system. And because we want these systems to be available and scalable for everywhere. So this is a kind of building research project, but we also do some more high-level research on just ending on something extraordinary that happened in Denmark in the last few years. Because once we were doing this project with Velux, we were asking ourselves, okay, we're doing something very sustainable, but is it actually sustainable? Can you benchmark this sustainable? And we started asking experts, universities. We found out nobody in the industry could tell us what is sustainable. It's been a relative term that we've been working with for 20 years, but nobody had a kind of point, when is it actually sustainable? When is it within planetary boundaries? So we set out to ask this, can we design a roadmap for the building industry to get within planetary boundaries? And we did this together with Zebra and Atelier, 2 other consultants in Denmark, one engineer and one architect, and with the support of some Danish foundations. We took contact to some of the universities working with this. So we just had this new law saying that there's a limit of 12 kilos of CO2 per square meter per year for our construction. And then this professor, Harpe Birgisdottir, came out and said, well, that's all good, but our average is actually 9.6. Nobody knew when they made the law. So we're a little bit below. Then another professor came out and said, this is not a strategy for sustainable construction in Denmark. It's just a slow way to deplete the planet. And so we teamed up with these 2 to investigate the impact for climate change on the built environment. And what we found from their report was very kind of simple and radical, that as a globe we are emitting around 50 billion tons of CO2 every year, and we need to get down to 2.5 billion tons, so that's a reduction of 95% across every sector across the globe. That's our target. And this is from the IPCC, so it's not like unique information, but it's never really shared in this direct manner. And we also started to look at what is the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is then a budget for allowed emissions that will keep us just at 1.5 degrees. So there's a budget of 500 billion tons of CO2. Depending on how sure we want to be within that, it's 300 to 500. So we could take that budget and say, so we know that we have a 5-year period to, if we keep going business as usual, then there's a 5-year period, and then we need to kind of cut every emission. So we said, but if we kind of step it, then we can just kind of reduce with 10% every year. We thought that's probably possible with innovations. So that's the logic of the reduction roadmap, is to make a roadmap for the industry. And then we made the allocation from the global emissions today to where we need to go. And we then sort of allocated across the chain from global to national based on the amount of inhabitants in Denmark. And from that we gave a budget for the construction, new construction, which is about 3.3% of what we use in Denmark. And from that we could say that that's used for 3 million new square meters every year. So that gives us a budget per square meter, and then when we have a life cycle assessment of 50 years life cycle, then we have the measurement that we use, which will give us the sort of target per year. And that gave us kind of these reduction pathways. The most radical was in 29, and the more easy one, which is only 50% chance of staying within the 1.5, is going to 35. We now know that it's going to be even more radical. But we knew this, and we could see the legislation was up here, so we started going out to the industry with this sort of reduction roadmap initiative, presenting this to the whole Danish industry, being really afraid of how they would react, because this is radical input. And we were surprised to see the big investment funds, the big developers, the big contractors, all the big architects, engineers, and contractors they actually supported this. But they all said, we want to go there, but we cannot do it alone. So we made this sort of campaign asking the industry, who is supportive of a legislation that follows the Paris Agreement? And we were blown away by what happened then, because in 4 months we did this digital campaign because we couldn't afford a real campaign, but we just put it out on LinkedIn, and we made a small press package. So once you signed the petition, you could share it, and that started working sort of like a catalyst. So, and it became a huge thing in the media, and the minister was super pressed, and we had meetings with all ministers and all the parties. So it became quite a big pressure on the minister. And what happened was like unseen, I think, across the globe. So we had all the largest consultants, architecture companies, all the largest contractors, manufacturers, also the largest pension funds, private developers, all the big ones, the largest social housing organizations also supporting this. And then something surprising, then the municipalities came in, like Copenhagen, Aarhus, Odense. These big municipalities said, we also signed the Paris Agreement. We need the construction industry to follow this, so we will also sign this. And the big industrial organizations, trade unions, educational institutions, and a lot of the parties signed this. So suddenly we had created a movement starting from the industry pushing the politicians to lower. So maybe just get enough and just in time. And this is the climate activist Rob Hopkins saying that. But I do think that reduction roadmap and a lot of the sort of bigger movements, it is not about one single company, it's not about one single architect. It's about seeing architecture as a collective and seeing our role as being the ones who can actually push a collective movement. That is the role that we should take on as architects in this century, I believe. And that we're trying to do that from our small company here in Nørrebro with 50 people working with this agenda. But I think that's the introduction to who we are and how we work and how we try to impact the world.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.